The scent of dust and nostalgia hung heavy in the air of my old dormitory room. I could still feel the phantom ache in my right hand, the tendons severed, a pain that had haunted me for over a decade in a life that was both mine and not. I blinked, and the vision of a luxury hotel bathroom, the cold tile against my cheek, and the screams of Liam and Alara as I dragged them with me into the abyss faded away. I was back. I was 17 again, and the college entrance exam was tomorrow. A knock on the door broke the trance. "Clara? Someone's here for you." "It's Liam." My blood ran cold. Liam. The name was a poison in my veins. I smoothed down my simple cotton dress, took a deep breath to steady the raging storm inside me, and walked out into the golden haze of the evening. He stood there under the old oak tree just as I remembered. His army uniform was crisp, his posture straight, but his smile was the same practiced, insincere curve I had come to loathe. In his hand he held a small, clumsily woven ring made of foxtail grass. "Clara," he said, his voice a low, coaxing murmur that had once made my heart flutter. Now it just made my stomach turn. "You look beautiful." I said nothing, my arms crossed over my chest. The silence stretched, awkward and heavy. He cleared his throat, holding out the grass ring. "I rushed back on leave just to see you before your exam. For good luck." I looked at the pathetic little ring, a symbol of empty promises. In my first life I had treasured it as if it were platinum and diamond. "Clara," he pressed on, his smile becoming strained. "I have a promise for you. After you finish the exam I will marry you." I allowed a cold, internal laugh to echo in the silence of my mind. What a toad dreaming of becoming a swan. Ugly and shameless. "But there's one small condition," he continued, his eyes shifting away from mine for a fraction of a second. "You have to write my younger cousin Alara's name on your exam paper instead of yours." There was the request that had shattered my first life. I looked at his fake, pleading expression, the performance of a man who thought he held all the cards. He had no idea he was standing before a ghost, a woman who had already lived through the tragedy he was so casually scripting. "Clara, please," he coaxed, seeing my stony silence. "As soon as you write Alara's name on tomorrow's exam, I'll go to your house and propose formally. You know her grades are terrible and her health is so fragile. Her parents said if she doesn't get in this year, they'll cut her off. You're different. You're strong. If you don't make it this year, you can try again next year. Your parents will still support you. But she only has this one chance." He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "She's my cousin, which makes her your cousin too. We're all one family. As her future sister-in-law, it's only right for you to look after her, isn't it? Everything is arranged on our side. No one will notice. Just do as I say, and when you marry into my family, we'll be grateful to you forever. I love you. I love you." 3 words that had been the chain around my neck. Hearing them now, I sneered inside. He was so sure of his charm, so confident in his ability to manipulate a young, infatuated girl. Too bad for him. The girl he was talking to was long gone. In her place stood a woman who had been reborn from ashes and vengeance. In my first life I had been that fool. Young, trusting, and blinded by what I thought was love, I had agreed. A month later the results were published. Alara, who could barely scrape a passing grade, had achieved outstanding scores and was accepted into the prestigious Capital University. I, who had always been top of my class, had failed, and became the laughingstock of our small town. My heart had ached, but I'd told myself to be strong, to try again next year. But Liam and Alara hadn't allowed that. The day before my second attempt, on my way to pick up my admission ticket, 2 thugs had ambushed me. They had broken my hand, severing the tendons so thoroughly I could never write properly again. My dreams of university, of a future, were extinguished in an alleyway filled with pain and cruel laughter. Meanwhile, Alara thrived at the nation's best university, and Liam, using the connections his army career afforded him, rose quickly through the ranks. They forgot about me, the simple girl from the countryside they had used and discarded. When I finally found them over a decade later in the capital, Liam a wealthy businessman, Alara a respected professor, the truth had come out in a torrent of their own arrogant gloating. They weren't cousins. Alara had been adopted by Liam's uncle. They were childhood sweethearts who had targeted me, the top student, from the start. They used my feelings for Liam to trick me into giving Alara my spot, and then they crippled me to ensure I could never expose them. My burning resentment in that final moment must have moved some celestial power, because white impermanence himself took pity on me and granted me this one chance at rebirth. I snapped back to the present, to Liam still holding out that ridiculous grass ring, trying to slip it onto my finger. A wave of pure disgust ran through me, and I snatched my hand back as if burned. He stared, a wounded expression plastered on his face. Clara, what's wrong? Is it that you don't want to marry me, or that you don't want to help Alara? I held back the overwhelming urge to slap the hypocrisy right off his face. My fingers twitched at my side. I forced myself to speak, my voice surprisingly calm. Neither. It's just getting late and I need to get back to the dorm. I have the exam tomorrow. The moment I mentioned the exam, his demeanor shifted. He didn't dare press too hard and risk upsetting me before the big day. Instead, he fumbled in his pocket and pulled out a small card, shoving it into my hand. It's Alara's admission ticket. Just remember, don't write the wrong name. Once the exam is over, we can officially start our life together. It's late. You should head back and get some rest. You can't afford to mess up tomorrow. How thoughtful of this scumbag, I thought, worrying about my grades now. I accepted the card, pretending to be the obedient, love-struck girl he believed me to be. I understand, I said softly, then turned and ran toward the dorm without a backward glance. That man was truly a toad. Ugly, shameless, and he thought he could make me sacrifice my future for his darling Alara. Just you wait. The moment he was out of sight, I stopped under a flickering street lamp. I looked down at Alara's admission ticket, her smug photo staring back at me. With a cold, deliberate tear, I ripped it in half, then into quarters, and scattered the pieces to the wind. If I weren't worried they might concoct some other vicious scheme to prevent me from taking the exam, I would have torn apart his hypocritical face right then and there. Let them strut around for a few more days. Once I finished the exam, I would deal with them properly. Every bit of suffering I had endured in my past life, I would make them pay back 1,000-fold. The college entrance exam arrived right on schedule. I walked into the hall with a calmness that surprised me. With white impermanence having merged the memories and knowledge of both my lifetimes, I had the sharp mind of my 17-year-old self, tempered by the bitter wisdom of my past. I filled out my own name with a steady, sure hand. After handing in my paper, I felt a profound, unshakable peace. I had done better than in my past life. Capital University was practically guaranteed. But I hadn't taken more than a few steps from the exam hall gate when I spotted them. Two striking figures standing too close under a tree. Liam, tall and handsome in his uniform, and Alara, beautiful and delicate, her hand resting on his arm. They looked every bit the loving couple, not cousins. In my last life, I must have been blinded by pig oil. The clues were always there. I was just the fool trapped in their game. Clara, you're out. Liam called, his voice full of false cheer. How was it? I answered honestly. I did really well. Alara's face lit up with a predatory gleam. She grabbed Liam's hand and bounced with excitement. Did you hear that, Liam? Clara said she did great. Liam's grin was wide and triumphant. Now you can be at ease. With Clara's grades, she's sure to get into a top university. Watching them so shamelessly dream about their future with my results right in front of me, I nearly hurt myself holding back laughter. Go ahead and laugh. Laugh as much as you want. Soon enough, you won't be able to smile at all. After brushing them off, I hurried back to the dorm, packed my few belongings and rushed home. In my last life, my parents had worried themselves sick over me. After my hand was broken, they spent everything they had searching for doctors. It was on one of those desperate journeys to see an old physician that their cart had overturned, and I lost them forever. The guilt had eaten me alive for over a decade. Before I even reached our village, I saw them. Two familiar, beloved figures standing under the old locust tree at the entrance, waiting for me. In a time when rural families often valued sons over daughters, my parents had only me, and they loved me with a fierceness that defied all gossip. Mom, Dad, I'm back. I tossed my luggage aside and threw myself into their arms, the scent of home and safety washing over me. I had missed them so terribly my soul ached. My father's face turned bright red as he scolded me, but his arms held me tight. You silly girl, still hugging like that? Haven't you grown up at all? I laughed, a real, genuine sound that felt foreign on my tongue, and pressed even closer. But I am your little girl. I'll never grow up. My mother chuckled, her hand stroking my hair. You mischievous thing. Did you not do well on the exam? Her voice was gentle, bracing for disappointment. Even if you didn't, it doesn't matter. We'll support you for another year if we have to. We can still manage. Hearing that, my eyes stung with tears. They had always been this way, my unwavering fortress. Mom, Dad, don't worry, I said, pulling back to look at their dear faces. I did really well this time. Just wait for my admission letter. Their faces broke into the widest, most beautiful grins, their joy so pure it almost hurt to look at. Our girl is amazing. She really is our daughter. Come on, let's go home. I stewed some pork for you. After a dinner that tasted of heaven itself, I washed up and retreated to my small, clean room. Looking at the comfortable bed, I didn't rush to sleep. There was something I couldn't wait to do. The exams were over. It was time to begin my reckoning. I would start with Liam. I had learned in my past life that if you want to destroy someone, you go straight for the heart. You strike where it's fatal. And what did Liam value most now? What was he most proud of? Without a doubt, it was his identity as a soldier. That green uniform was his coat of gold, his ticket to respect and future success. It was the very reason I had trusted him so easily. But he didn't deserve to wear it. Because even that identity was stolen. Sitting at my small wooden desk, I took out a sheet of letter paper and a pen. The moonlight streamed through the window, illuminating my determined face. I began to write a report to his military unit, detailing the corruption that had put him in that uniform. His uncle, the brigade leader, had abused his power, switching the enlistment quota when Liam was too sick to qualify fairly. Well, I thought, my pen scratching decisively across the paper, let me do the world a favor and cut off his ladder to success. The letter felt heavy in my hand, a simple piece of paper that held the power to shatter a man's future. I'd spent half the night crafting it, ensuring every accusation was precise and damning. I knew the name of the real recruit who should have gone, a burly, quiet boy from the other side of the county named Owen. I knew the date of the switch, and I knew Liam's uncle's official title. In my first life, they'd boasted about their cleverness once the statute of limitations had passed, never imagining their gloating would become my weapon. The next morning, I told my parents I was going into town to run an errand. The post office was a small, dusty building that smelled of ink and old paper. I paid for the stamp, slid the letter into the slot marked for military correspondence, and felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. The first domino had been pushed. On my way back, feeling lighter than I had in years, I decided to stop at the supply and marketing cooperative to see if there was any new fabric. I was already dreaming of making a new dress for my journey to the capital. But fate, it seemed, enjoyed its little ironies. Right at the entrance, clutching a bundle of fabric ration tickets and laughing, were Liam and Alara. Their hands were entwined, their heads close together. They looked like any young couple in love, which of course they were. The moment they saw me, their laughter died. Their hands sprang apart as if electrocuted. Alara's face went through a comical series of adjustments. Shock, panic, and finally a strained, sickly sweet smile. "Clara," she chirped, her voice too high. "What a surprise. My leg was feeling weak today. My cousin was just helping me walk. Don't misunderstand." I gave a slow, cold smile. "Misunderstand what? Aren't you two cousins?" I let the question hang in the air, watching her squirm. Alara let out an awkward, tinkling laugh. "It's nothing, Liam." Seeing his precious darling falter, Liam immediately jumped to her defense, his face hardening as he looked at me. "Clara, you should be kinder to Alara. Even though you've helped us, if you're trying to use that to demand something in return, that's just shameless." I almost laughed out loud. Shameless? He had the audacity to call me shameless? The sheer, unmitigated gall of it made my vision swim with red for a second. I truly wanted to reach out and claw the hypocrisy from his eyes. Liam turned back to Alara, his voice softening into a syrupy coo. "Don't be upset, Alara. I don't think Clara meant it that way. Just forgive her this time." He even had the nerve to give me a condescending, magnanimous nod, as if he were a king pardoning a peasant. Without another glance in my direction, he turned his attention fully to Alara. "Let's go buy the fabric. Mom can make you some new clothes to wear when you start college. We can't have the city people laughing at you." They walked into the store, their hands finding each other's again as soon as they thought they were out of my sight. I stared at their retreating backs, the laughter I had held back now bubbling up inside me, cold and sharp. Treacherous ingrates. And they still dared to dream of Alara wearing new clothes at my university. Keep dreaming, I thought, my smile turning icy. Your little fantasy is about to end. Their provocation in town had lit a fire under me. Waiting for the military bureaucracy to act was too slow. I needed to accelerate their downfall. I wanted to see the panic in their eyes now. Instead of going home, I detoured behind the village committee's building. I knew from my past life that Owen, the boy whose future Liam had stolen, was a man of few words but explosive temper. He was known to be the strongest in the county, a man who could and allegedly had knocked out a wild boar with a single punch. His family was poor and unconnected. They'd had no recourse when the quota was stolen. I scribbled a new note on a scrap of paper. It was simple and direct. Your army quota was stolen by Liam. His uncle, Brigade Leader Morrison, switched the papers. Ask Morrison's wife. She brags about it when she's drunk. I tied the note securely to a small, smooth stone. Taking a deep breath, I peered over the crumbling back wall. I could see a large, shirtless figure chopping wood with brutal, efficient swings. It was Owen. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was a gamble. A dangerous one. I threw the stone over the wall. It landed with a soft thud in the dirt near his feet. Which bastard dares to mess with me? A voice roared from inside, so full of fury it made me jump. I'll kill you. The sound of clattering and banging followed, the chopping axe, I presumed, being thrown aside. I panicked. I hadn't thought this through. If he saw me, his rage would be indiscriminate. I bolted, running like a startled rabbit, my feet barely touching the ground. I didn't stop until I was safely hidden behind the thick trunk of the old locust tree at the village entrance, my chest heaving. Thankfully, I had thrown the note over the back wall. He wouldn't have seen me. But the sheer raw terror of his response confirmed what I knew. Owen was a force of nature. Liam's family had been playing with fire by crossing him. In this era, information was localized and easily suppressed. They had covered their tracks well. In my first life, Owen had never discovered the truth. But this time I had torn that veil of ignorance. Now all I had to do was wait for the explosion. When I got home, I didn't idle around. My revenge was set in motion. But my own future required preparation. There was one more piece of Liam's future success that I needed to claim for myself. I sought out my neighbor, Benjamin. He was a quiet, lanky boy a year younger than me, with a perpetual sunburn and a kind heart. He was also the best swimmer in the village. Ben, I called, finding him mending a fishing net by the riverbank. Can you teach me how to swim? Properly, I mean. He looked up, surprised. You, Clara? The bookworm wants to get wet. He grinned. Sure. Why the sudden interest? I just think it's a useful skill, I said evasively. And it's so hot. Benjamin turned out to be a patient and excellent teacher. The river water was cool and refreshing. After just a week of his instruction, I could dog paddle with ease. Within a few more days, I had mastered a decent freestyle. The movement was liberating, the water a element I had never truly appreciated in my first studious life. Everything was ready. Now I just had to wait for the right opportunity. In my last life, one of the main reasons Liam and his family had thrived so easily in the capital and shaken me off was because of a single heroic act. A few weeks after the exams, Liam had chanced upon a man drowning in the river. That man was Professor Albright, a renowned geologist from Capital University who had come to the countryside for research. Grateful for his life, the professor, with his vast network of influential former students, had become Liam's patron, paving his road to business success. But in this life, that good deed, that golden connection, would be mine. A few days later, the sky was dark and gloomy, the air thick with the promise of a storm. It was a terrible day for a swim, which was exactly why I was heading to the river. For some reason, Liam had felt an unusual urge to go swimming that day in my first life. He trusted his instincts, thinking he might catch a fish for his delicate Alara. I found a hidden spot among the reeds and waited. Sure enough, after about an hour, I saw a figure walking along the opposite bank. It was Liam. My breath hitched. This was it. But then from the trees behind him, another, much larger figure emerged. My eyes widened. I hadn't anticipated this. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the confrontation. Owen, a mountain of muscle, pointed a thick finger at Liam, his body radiating menace. Liam, to his credit, stood his ground for a moment, his soldier's pride refusing to let him back down immediately. That was his mistake. Owen's fist moved faster than I could blink. There was a sickening thwack that carried even over the sound of the river. Liam crumpled to the ground. Owen didn't stop. He unleashed a brutal flurry of kicks and punches onto Liam's prone form. It was a vicious, merciless beating. I saw Owen's foot connect with Liam's leg, heard a distinct, horrifying crack. "Ah, damn it. Who the hell are you?" Liam's scream was a strangled cry of agony and terror. Owen leaned down, said something into Liam's ear, and then delivered one final savage kick to Liam's midsection before melting back into the forest as silently as he had appeared. Liam lay motionless on the bank. I was frozen, a hand clamped over my mouth. I had wanted revenge, but the visceral reality of it was shocking. A part of me, the part that remembered a broken hand and a lifetime of pain, felt a grim satisfaction. The rest of me felt cold. Just then I saw it. A struggle in the middle of the river, a head bobbing above the choppy water, a desperate, choked cry for help. Professor Albright. This was my chance. Without a second thought, I dove into the water. The current was strong, but Benjamin's lessons served me well. I swam with a powerful, determined stroke, my eyes fixed on the flailing man. I reached him, hooked an arm under his shoulders, and began the arduous task of pulling him back to shore. He was a dead weight, panic making him clumsy. Finally, I dragged him onto the muddy bank. He collapsed, coughing and sputtering, soaked from head to toe. He looked like a drowned rat, his glasses lost to the river. "Thank you," he gasped, his voice trembling. "Young lady, you saved my life." "It's okay," I said, catching my breath. "Let's get you somewhere warm." I decided to bring him to my home. On the way back, supporting the shivering professor, I saw someone else on the path. It was Owen. His knuckles were raw and bleeding, but he was smiling, a grim, satisfied look on his face. For a moment our eyes met. A flicker of guilt passed through me, but he just gave me a slow, almost imperceptible nod, as if acknowledging a shared secret before walking on. Professor Albright didn't seem to notice. He was too busy trying to stop his teeth from chattering. When we arrived at my house, my parents, with their innate kindness, immediately bustled into action. My mother heated water while my father fetched a set of his clean, simple clothes. Soon, Professor Albright was sitting by the hearth, wrapped in a blanket, sipping a bowl of my mother's strong ginger soup. "Young lady," he said, his color returning. "I am Professor James Albright. I must repay you for this. I am not an ungrateful man." I waved him off modestly. No, it was nothing. Anyone would have done the same. In truth, my heart was singing. This golden connection was now in my hands, not Liam's. But the professor was relentless. "Nonsense. I insist." His eyes then wandered to the wall where my academic awards and certificates were proudly displayed. "This girl is a student?" I hadn't said anything, but my father, his chest puffed with pride, replied for me. "Yes, our Clara is a top student. Always first in her class. She just took the college entrance exam this year. She said she's aiming for a good university." Professor Albright's interest was immediately piqued. "She just finished the entrance exam? Then tell me, young lady, which university do you want to attend? Any interest in going to the capital?" My heart leaped. "Of course," I said, my voice firm. "I want to go to the capital. And I want to bring my parents with me." I looked at my mother, who was fussing with the teapot. "My mom isn't in the best health and I can't bear to leave them behind. Taking them to the capital has always been my plan." It was the truth of this new life I was building. Professor Albright's eyes lit up. "Excellent. A filial daughter is truly admirable. I'll be waiting for you in the capital." He fumbled in his wet jacket, found a small waterproof note case, and handed me a slip of paper with a phone number and an address. "Once you get there, come find me. I'll help arrange things for you." He left me no chance to refuse, pressing the note firmly into my hand. Soon after, a small, official-looking sedan came to pick him up. The sight of a car in our village was a rare event, and it left my parents stunned. Only then did they realize the man I had saved was someone truly important. My father looked at me, his eyes full of a new, profound emotion. "Clara," he said, his voice thick. "If we go, then we all go. Our family doesn't split up." My mother nodded firmly, her hand finding mine. "That's right. Our family won't be separated. Not even in death." I threw my arms around them both, holding them tightly. "Yes," I whispered, my voice muffled against my father's shoulder. "This life we stay together." From that day on, my parents began quietly preparing. They started exchanging our stored grain on the black market for cash and ration coupons. My mother and I spent our days either working for work points in the brigade or at home, sorting through our belongings, deciding what to take and what to leave behind. My plan was simple. Once my scores came out, I'd fill in my preferences for Capital University, wait for the admission letter, and then we would leave together for a new beginning. But before the admission letter could arrive, my past came knocking at my door. And it was uglier than I could have ever imagined. The peace of our home was shattered a week later. We had just returned from tending our small vegetable plot when I saw them, clustered at our gate like a murder of crows. Liam's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Morrison and Alara, flanked by the village's most notorious matchmaker, a woman named Agnes whose smile was as sharp as a sickle. The moment they spotted me, their faces bloomed into grotesque, overjoyed smiles. "Clara, you're back. We've been waiting for you such a long time," Mrs. Morrison cried, her voice dripping with a warmth that was as fake as it was unsettling. She rushed forward, her wrinkled face bunched up in a grin, and reached for my hand. I recoiled, stepping back so quickly I bumped into my father. When someone shows such sudden, unearned friendliness, it's always because they want something. Mrs. Morrison had never liked me. In my first life, every time I visited Alara, her expression had been sour, her comments laced with condescension. Seeing her smile at me now made my skin crawl. When I brushed her hand away, her expression darkened for a split second, a flash of the real venom beneath the surface. But just as quickly she plastered on another sickly smile. "Clara, we haven't seen you for just a few days and you're acting so distant now." My mother, sharp as a tack and fiercely protective, noticed my recoil and immediately stepped in front of me, her voice like shattering ice. "And who are you? Why are you getting so close to our Clara like you know her?" The bluntness made Mrs. Morrison's face flush an ugly red. The matchmaker, Agnes, hurried to smooth things over, chuckling with a sound like grinding stones. "Ah, what a joke. But aren't you all family? No need to act like strangers. Don't be upset, young lady." My mother's brows shot up. "What nonsense are you spouting? Since when are we family with you?" Agnes quickly explained, her eyes shifting between my parents. "Oh, it's my fault. I should have said this sooner. We're here to discuss a happy event. Your Clara and our Liam are in love. Today the family has come to propose marriage." Propose marriage? The words hung in the air, absurd and terrifying. My mother was struck dumb with shock. My father's face, usually so gentle, turned thunderously dark. They had always doted on me, their only child, treating me like a little girl who hadn't grown up yet. The idea of marriage, especially to a boy they barely knew and whose family they instinctively distrusted, was anathema. But the matchmaker, oblivious to the storm she was stirring, pressed on, gesturing grandly toward the Morrisons. "Yes, I heard the two children have been seeing each other for a year or two now. Their feelings are strong. So to avoid wasting any more time, Liam's parents and his sister asked me to come along to propose properly. That way we can arrange the marriage sooner." At her words, the Morrisons and Alara nodded vigorously, their faces masks of feigned sincerity. "Bah!" My mother spat the word with pure disgust. "Don't you dare smear my daughter's reputation. Claire is going to college. What marriage nonsense is this?" The moment my mother said college, the Morrisons exchanged looks of barely concealed contempt. Their smug expressions said it all. They still believed, with unshakable arrogance, that Alara would be the one going to university in my place. Watching them, I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing out loud. Dream on. But a cold dread was coiling in my stomach. Why were they here? Why no? This had never happened in my previous life. What had changed? Just then, old Widow Miller, the village's most prolific gossip, squeezed her way to the front of the growing crowd of onlookers. She sidled up to me, her eyes gleaming with malicious delight. "Huh," she whispered, her voice carrying despite her efforts to be quiet. "Isn't Liam that unlucky fellow who got stuffed into a sack and had his leg broken just a few days ago? I heard from the blind fortune teller in the next village that Liam's misfortune is so bad he needs to marry someone quickly to ward it off. If you ask me, that's truly shameless." She clicked her tongue. "He's already crippled. How can he still have the gall to come propose marriage and ruin a young girl's life?" Suddenly, everything clicked into place with horrifying clarity. So Owen's retaliation had been that thorough. Liam wasn't just injured, he was crippled. And from the widow Miller's insinuations, the damage might be even more fundamental. No wonder Alara, the moment Liam became a liability, was trying to push him onto me. They wanted a scapegoat, a ritual bride to bear the burden of his ruined life. Widow Miller's words were a stone thrown into a pond, and the ripples of gossip exploded through the crowd. The villagers, for all their petty squabbles, closed ranks against outsiders threatening one of their own. "Your son is crippled and you still want to ruin someone else's daughter?" a man shouted from the back. Mrs. Morrison flushed red and stammered, "No. His leg can still be healed." Widow Miller sneered, her voice rising to a triumphant shrill. "A broken leg might be fixed, but once a man's thing is destroyed, can that be healed?" The words dropped like a bombshell. A collective gasp went up, followed by a wave of furious voices. "What? He can't even be a man anymore and he still dares to marry? Isn't that ruining someone's life? Do they think Clara is so easy to bully? Come on, let's drive these shameless people out of our village." The agitation grew, the crowd pressing in. Alara realized things were spiraling out of control. In a desperate, vicious move, she suddenly jumped out and pointed a trembling finger at me, her voice sharp and accusing. "Clara, aren't you going to say something? My brother Liam has always treated you so well. Now that you've heard he's crippled, are you just going to despise him? Clara, I didn't think you were this kind of person." Her words were poison. She was not only publicly claiming I had a close romantic relationship with Liam, but she was also condemning me from a moral high ground, painting me as a cruel, shallow woman who would abandon a man the moment he was disabled. In this era, a girl's reputation was everything. A single stain of heartlessness or unfaithfulness could follow her forever, making her an outcast. Alara was utterly, breathtakingly shameless. In both my lives she had schemed alongside Liam, but the moment he became useless she was ready to throw him to the wolves and tie me to his broken body forever. She wanted to ensure she reaped the benefits when things were good and saddled me with the burden when disaster struck. I looked at her, my face a mask of wide-eyed, innocent shock. "Alara, what are you saying? I've only seen your Liam a few times and always because of you. How could that possibly mean we have a close relationship?" I put a hand to my heart, a picture of wounded virtue. "Heaven knows I've never had anything to do with him. Don't smear me just because you're jealous of my grades. Afraid I might get into a better university than you." Alara's jaw dropped. She stared at me, utterly floored. The Clara she knew, the one from my first life, would have been flustered, tearful, and easily manipulated. She couldn't believe I was fighting back. "Clara, how can you talk nonsense like that?" she shrieked, her composure cracking. "I'm not smearing you. You and Liam have been together for ages. And besides," she added, her voice regaining a shred of its old arrogance, "my grades are far better than yours. Why would I be jealous when I get into university and you can't even get into a vocational school? Don't come crying to me later." The certainty in her tone was almost believable. He truly, genuinely thought I had written her name on that exam. The sheer, stupid arrogance of it was astounding. But facts were facts. "At school," I said, my voice clear and carrying over the murmurs of the crowd, "your grades have always been at the bottom. When have you ever done better than me?" Alara's face twisted into a mask of fury. "Claire, you liar. Do you think no one knows the truth? Why else would Liam's parents suddenly come here today to propose? Isn't it because of your lies?" As luck would have it, a few of my classmates were in the crowd. They immediately stepped forward, their voices loud and indignant. "Exactly. With Alara's lousy scores always ranking at the bottom, how dare she boast about getting into university? Don't make us laugh. Clara has always been first." The crowd erupted in laughter and jeers. Alara's face flushed as red as a boiled lobster. She glared at me with pure, undiluted hatred. "Clara, I didn't expect you to be so ruthless. Don't think I'll ever be friends with you again." I couldn't help it. A short, sharp laugh escaped me. "Friends? I never wanted to be friends with someone like you. A shameless girl who tries to frame me doesn't deserve to be in my life." The villagers, their blood now thoroughly boiled, shouted in unison. "Drive out this shameless family." Yes, drive them out. And so the Morrisons and Alara were chased out of the village. Mrs. Morrison, who always held her head so high, was now fleeing in disgrace, her hair coming undone, her fine clothes splattered with mud. From my vantage point, I saw my parents in the thick of the crowd, their bodies shielding me while their hands, I noticed with a surge of fierce love, landed heavy, discreet blows on the retreating Morrisons. But the fiercest of all was Owen. His wild boar-punching fists pounded mercilessly on Mr. Morrison's back and shoulders, his face a stony mask of vengeance finally served. The Morrisons were left crying, swearing, and promising never to step foot in our village again. With them gone, I finally let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. The immediate threat was over. But this was only the beginning. If my calculations were right, the report I had sent should have already reached Liam's unit. Once their official paperwork came down, that would mark the true end of Liam and his family. For now, I didn't need to lift a finger. I just had to wait for karma to strike. Over the next few days, I stayed home quietly, helping my parents pack and waiting for the exam results. But news of the Morrisons, carried faithfully by the ever-reliable widow Miller, still found its way to me. Liam still hadn't woken up from his coma. His family, more desperate than ever for a ritual bride to ward off his bad luck, had tried again after failing with me. This time they found another family from a distant, poorer village, tempted by the generous bride price and, unbelievably, the tarnished but still official title of Liam being a soldier. The other side had reluctantly agreed. But just before the wedding could happen, the official documents from the military arrived. Liam's stolen identity was exposed. He was stripped of his position, given a permanent black mark on his record, and placed under investigation. His uncle, the brigade leader, was removed from his post for corruption. Liam was finished. Completely. The other family, upon hearing the news, immediately cancelled the engagement. Their son was not only ruined and unconscious but now also a disgraced criminal with no future. Liam's parents were left facing a desolate old age with no one to support them. Mrs. Morrison, widow Miller, reported with gleeful schadenfreude, wept day and night at the hospital, begging anyone who would listen to help her find a bride to wash away her son's misfortune. When I heard that, a cold smile touched my lips. Truly, retribution never fails. But Mrs. Morrison was being foolish. The perfect candidate for her little ritual bride was standing right in front of her, and she hadn't even thought of it yet. Fine, I thought. I'll give her a little reminder. The day the exam results were to be posted, I set out early with a group of my classmates to the school in town. We arrived before the official announcement, the air crackling with anticipation and fear. Just as I was about to head inside to see the list, I caught sight of a familiar hunched figure shuffling near the gate. It was Mrs. Morrison. She looked years older, her face etched with deep lines of worry and bitterness. I told my friends I'd catch up and hurried after her. She was muttering to herself, a low, continuous stream of misery. Why so unlucky? My boy had such a bright future. That vicious thug. And that ungrateful little wench Clara. If she had just married him, he wouldn't be like this. My name on her lips solidified my resolve. Deep in her toxic thoughts, she walked right into someone. Instead of apologizing, the man, a harried-looking teacher, tried to hurry off. Mrs. Morrison, a volcano of rage desperate for an eruption, wasn't about to let him go. She grabbed his arm and then her eyes focused, finding to her delight that it was me she had collided with. Her eyes lit up with a terrifying, desperate fire. She thought fate had delivered me to her. Well, Clara, she sneered, her grip tightening on my arm like a vice. You despised my son and drove us out of your village. Never thought you'd fall into my hands today, did you? Seeing her raise her other hand, likely to strike me or drag me away, I knew I had to act fast. I quickly pinched my own thigh hard, the sharp pain bringing immediate convincing tears to my eyes. My voice trembled, layered with feigned fear and sincerity. Auntie, you've misunderstood. That wasn't my intention. That day I was only angry because Liam and Alara provoked me so badly. Her raised hand faltered, confused by my tears. I seized the chance and dropped my bombshell, leaning in as if sharing a painful secret. The truth is, I saw them. Together. Sneaking around behind my back, carrying on like lovers in bed. I saw it with my own eyes. I let my voice drop to a horrified whisper. And aren't they supposed to be cousins? Isn't that disgusting? Haven't you ever noticed how strange they are? What kind of proper siblings hold hands in the street, whisper like that? It's shameful. I was exaggerating, of course, but I knew it would strike a chord. Others might not know Alara was adopted, but Mrs. Morrison certainly did. I remembered Liam carelessly letting it slip in my first life, and the look of panic on his mother's face when he did. Now my words hit their mark perfectly. I watched her face sink, darkening with dawning horror and rage as she connected the dots. The intimate moments she had dismissed as childish affection now took on a new, sinister meaning. The time was right. I gently placed my hand over her now limp one that was holding my arm. I spoke softly, earnestly, as if advising a dear aunt. "Auntie, what's the point of forcing me to marry Liam to ward off his bad luck? I hate him for being so cruel and heartless. Even if such a ritual brought him back to life, I could never treat him well." I let my gaze drift meaningfully toward the school, where the results would soon be posted. "Look at him. His leg is useless and he's broken in other ways too. He'll always need someone to care for him. Do you really think I, a future university student, could devote my life to looking after him?" I paused, letting the implication sink in. "You should find someone who truly has feelings for him. Someone willing to care for him out of love." I met her eyes, my own wide and innocent. Alara would be perfect. At my words, Mrs. Morrison's eyes finally sharpened with a terrible, clear purpose. The fog of her desperation lifted, replaced by a cold, calculating fury. "Yes," she whispered, the word a venomous hiss. "Alara is the right choice." She leaned closer as if we were co-conspirators. "You don't know this, but she and Liam aren't even blood-related. That little wretch. We treated her so well. We took her in. And when Liam ended up like this, needing a wife to cleanse his bad luck, she didn't lift a finger to help. How ungrateful." Her face contorted. "If it weren't for us, her patriarchal adoptive parents would have long since married her off to some old bachelor for a bride price. And this is how she repays us." She was now fully convinced the idea was her own. "No," she declared, her voice hardening. "I'll make her marry Liam. Let her serve him for life." Suddenly she faltered, glancing awkwardly at me. "But, didn't you promise to let her use your name for the exam? If she gets into college, how could she still marry Liam? Her adoptive parents would never agree to such a thing." This was the final knot, and I had the knife to cut it. I squeezed her hand tighter, my expression one of shared conspiracy. "Auntie, to tell you the truth, I caught the two of them together before the exam. That's why I didn't write her name. My results are my own." I let a hint of contempt color my voice. "Alara's grades are nothing. She'll never get into a university. She'll never look down on Liam because she doesn't even have the right to." Mrs. Morrison's face lit up with a joy that was ugly to behold. "Wonderful," she crowed. "That's perfect. She's too stupid for college anyway. She should stay here, marry my Liam, and take care of him for the rest of his life." Laughing with a gleeful, unhinged sound, she turned and hurried off, her previous despondency replaced by a grim, determined energy. I watched her back disappear into the crowded street and allowed myself a faint, cold smile. "Blair," I thought. "In this life, Liam is still yours. Are you happy now?" The schoolyard was a sea of anxious faces. I stood with my classmates, the air thick with the scent of chalk dust and nervous sweat. On the wall in front of us was a large sheet of white paper, soon to be filled with the names and scores that would dictate our futures. My own heart was a steady drum, not of fear but of cold certainty. Not far away, I spotted Alara and her adoptive mother, a sharp-faced woman with a permanent look of dissatisfaction. They were craning their necks, their bodies taut with a desperate, hungry energy. They were doomed to find nothing, and the anticipation of their downfall was a sweet poison on my tongue. Then a teacher emerged and pinned the list to the wall. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd as everyone surged forward. "There, Clara. First place." The voice, belonging to one of my classmates, rang out clear and triumphant. Out of 500 points, she scored 468. With such a score, she can definitely get into Capital University. A wave of congratulatory noise washed over me. "Clara, you're incredible. You're the top scorer." "And look," another voice chimed in, laced with derision, "there's no Alara at all. How dare she ever claim her grades were better than Clara's?" The chorus of praise was a balm on my old, scarred soul. 468. It was 20 points higher than my score in my first life. This time I would enter Capital University on my own merit, my own brilliance, untainted by their schemes. Finally, I allowed myself to look at Alara. Her face was a canvas of disbelief, her features twisting from confusion to dawning horror as the reality of the list, and my name at the very top, sank in. She never expected me to break my so-called promise. She had been so sure of her victory, so certain of my pliability. Her eyes, wide and frantic, scanned the list over and over, as if the act of looking could somehow conjure her name. When it didn't, her gaze snapped to me, filled with a venom so pure it was almost impressive. "Clara," she screamed, her voice cracking, shredding the celebratory air. "Why did you lie to me? You'll ruin me." I simply smiled, a calm, placid expression that I knew would infuriate her further. "What are you talking about? I don't understand. Tell me, exactly how did I lie to you?" "You promised you'd help me," she shrieked, taking a step toward me, her hands clenched into white-knuckled fists. I tilted my head, the picture of innocence. "Help you with what? Tell me exactly what I promised. Go on. Say it out loud." She stopped short, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The words stuck in her throat. She couldn't say it. To voice the scheme would be to expose herself, Liam, and their entire family to criminal charges. It would mean prison. Her eyes burned with helpless, seething hatred. The dam of her rage broke. With a guttural cry, she lunged at me, her fingers curled into claws aimed at my face. But before she could reach me, a hand shot out and yanked her back by her hair hard. It was her adoptive mother. The woman's face was a thundercloud of fury, her earlier desperation now transformed into humiliation and rage. She had found her daughter's name missing from the list, and the top student was the very girl Alara had just publicly attacked. "You shamed me," the woman screeched, dragging Alara by the hair. "You dare to drag down our family's name, and now you dare to attack the top scorer?" She rained slaps down on Alara's face, the sharp cracks echoing in the suddenly quiet schoolyard. "Useless trash. No grades, no future. And you still had the nerve to claim you'd get into college? You and Liam have fooled us miserably." He shook Alara like a rag doll. "We sacrificed everything, poured our hopes into you, and this is how you repay us. You liar. When we get home, I'll marry you off for a bride price." Alara was dragged away, a sobbing, struggling mess. But before she disappeared into the jeering crowd, she managed to twist her head and shoot me one last venomous look, her mouth forming two silent, unmistakable words. "Just wait." I met her gaze squarely, my smile never wavering. She probably still didn't realize she'd never have the chance to cause me trouble again. Once she went home, she would be too busy being married off to her comatose, crippled husband. Where would she find the time or strength for me? The Carters, as Widow Miller later confirmed with relish, moved with breathtaking speed. The very day the exam scores were released, they publicly announced that Alara had been adopted, severing any lingering sense of familial obligation. Then, after collecting a hefty bride price from the desperate Morrisons, a price that likely cleaned out their remaining savings, they married Alara off to Liam in a rushed, somber ceremony meant to ward off his bad luck. Strangely enough, Widow Miller reported, the ritual seemed to work. After the wedding, Liam actually woke from his coma. But the man who woke up was not the proud, ambitious soldier he had been. When he realized he was a cripple with a broken leg and, as the rumors insisted, no manhood, a profound darkness swallowed him. The final straw was the knowledge that Alara, the love of his life, hadn't visited him once during his coma and had to be forced into the marriage. Something inside Liam Morrison snapped. Word spread quickly through the gossip vines of the county. Liam had turned into a monster. He beat Alara 3 times a day, his impotent rage finding its only outlet in her suffering. He never allowed her to leave the house. When she tried to run away once, his parents dragged her back and Liam, in a fit of fury, broke her leg, making her just as crippled as he was. When Widow Miller told me this, her eyes wide with macabre excitement, we were shelling peas on my porch. I didn't laugh, but a profound, silent satisfaction settled deep within my bones. Now I thought the two of them are truly a match made in hell. Neither had the right to look down on the other. I filled out my university application with a steady hand, listing only Capital University. There were no backup options. It was the capital or nothing. Weeks later, the admission letter arrived. It was a thick, creamy envelope bearing the prestigious seal of Capital University. My mother cried. My father, a man of few words, held the letter for a long time, his calloused fingers tracing the embossed logo, his eyes shimmering with a pride so deep it was almost painful to witness. Our preparations went into a frenzy. We sold what little we couldn't take. The money from the grain, combined with my parents' meager savings, was carefully sewn into the lining of our jackets. We were leaving and we were never coming back. The night before our departure, I stood alone under the old locust tree, looking out at the village that had been my prison and my launch pad. The air was sweet with the scent of hay and distant rain. I felt no nostalgia for this place, only a fierce, burning anticipation for the future. A figure emerged from the shadows, making me start. It was Owen. He stood a few feet away, his massive frame silhouetted against the moonlit sky. "He's broken," Owen said, his voice a low rumble. "The man and his spirit." I nodded, saying nothing. He was quiet for a moment longer. "The letter. To the army. That was you." It wasn't a question. I met his gaze, my own steady. "The quota was always yours." He gave a slow, grim nod of acknowledgement. "The river," he said after another pause. "You were waiting that day. For the professor." A chill that had nothing to do with the night air ran down my spine. He saw too much. "Why?" he asked, his simple question laden with a depth I couldn't possibly explain. I looked toward the horizon, toward the unseen capital. "They broke something of mine once," I said, my voice soft but hard as steel. "I was just returning the favor." Owen was silent for a long time. Then he simply said, "The capital is a big place. Bigger minds than theirs. Be careful." He turned and melted back into the darkness as silently as he had arrived. I was left with the unsettling feeling that I had been both understood and warned. My revenge was complete, but the world beyond this village was vast and unknown. The game was over here, but a new one was about to begin. The journey to the capital was a 3-day ordeal of rattling trains, crowded stations, and the overwhelming scent of sweat and coal smoke. My parents, who had never been beyond the county line, clung to our bags with a mixture of fear and wonder. I, however, felt a strange sense of homecoming. The grimy windows and screeching brakes were the sounds of freedom. The capital itself was a shock to the system. The noise was a constant roaring beast. The blare of car horns, the clatter of trams, the buzz of 1,000 simultaneous conversations. Buildings stretched towards the sky so tall I felt dizzy looking up at them. People moved with a brisk, purposeful energy that was utterly foreign after the slow, rhythmic pace of village life. We found a cheap, cramped room in a bustling, slightly dilapidated courtyard house, our savings shrinking alarmingly fast with the first month's rent. The reality of our situation was a cold splash of water. My father, a farmer, and my mother, a seamstress, were out of their element. Their skills, so valued at home, were worthless here. "This is very big," my mother said, her voice small as she looked out our single window at the teeming alley below. "We will manage," my father said, his jaw set with a determination I knew was for my benefit. "I will find work. Your mother will find work." But I saw the fear in their eyes. This was my battle now. It was time to use the tool I had acquired. The next day I dressed in my best simple cotton dress and, clutching the slip of paper with Professor Albright's address, I ventured into the heart of the city. Capital University was a world unto itself, a sanctuary of ancient trees and grand, imposing buildings that whispered of knowledge and power. I felt a thrill that was entirely my own. This was where I belonged. Finding the geology department was easier than I expected. I stood outside Professor Albright's office, my heart hammering. Taking a deep breath, I knocked. "Enter." I pushed the door open. Professor Albright sat behind a desk piled high with papers and rock samples. He looked different, more authoritative in his tweed jacket, surrounded by the artifacts of his intellect. He glanced up, his eyes narrowing for a second before they widened in recognition. "Young lady, Clara, from the river." He stood up, a genuine smile breaking across his face. "You came. I knew you would." "Professor Albright," I said, bowing slightly. "I arrived in the capital with my parents a few days ago." "Excellent. And your exam results? Don't keep me in suspense." "I was accepted," I said, allowing a real smile to touch my lips. "I will be studying here this autumn." "Splendid." He beamed, coming around the desk to clasp my shoulders. "I knew it. A mind as sharp as yours." His expression then softened. "And your parents? You said you were bringing them. Settling in can be difficult." This was the moment. "It is a challenge, Professor," I admitted, allowing a hint of the anxiety I truly felt to show. Finding a place to live and, my father is a hard worker but his skills are for the land. My mother is a wonderful seamstress but here. I trailed off, letting the unspoken hardship hang in the air. Professor Albright nodded, his face thoughtful. Don't you worry about a thing. He moved back to his desk, scribbled a note and handed it to me. Take this to the university housing office. They sometimes have listings for family accommodations for staff and graduate students. It's not luxurious but it's safe and affordable. He then scribbled another note. And this is for the head of the university's maintenance department. A good man. He's always in need of diligent workers. Your father's experience with his hands will be valued. As for your mother. He tapped his chin. My wife is always complaining about finding a good tailor for alterations. I'll send her your way. I took the notes, the paper feeling as weighty and valuable as gold ingots. Professor. I don't know how to thank you. Nonsense. You saved my life, Clara. This is nothing. His eyes twinkled. Now go. Get settled. I expect to see you in my introductory geology class in the autumn. I think you'll find the subject has its own kind of poetry. Tears of gratitude pricked at my eyes but I held them back. I bowed again deeply this time. Thank you, Professor. Thank you. With his notes, the impossible became possible. Within a week, we had moved into a small, clean room in a building reserved for university affiliates. It was simple, but it had running water and was within the university's walls, a world away from the noisy, intimidating alley. My father started work as a groundskeeper's assistant, his farmer's strength and knowledge of plants making him a natural. My mother, after a successful meeting with Mrs. Albright, began taking in simple mending and alterations for a few of the professor's colleagues. We had a foothold. A precarious one, but it was real. One afternoon, a few weeks later, I was exploring the vast university library, running my fingers along the spines of books I had only ever dreamed of, when a voice spoke beside me. Geology? That's an unusual choice for a first year. I turned. A young man stood there, perhaps a year or two older than me. He had intelligent eyes behind a pair of simple glasses and carried a stack of engineering textbooks. He wasn't classically handsome like Liam, but his face was open and his smile was easy and genuine. It is, I agreed, closing the book I was holding. But I find it grounding. It's the story of the world written in stone. It doesn't lie. He looked surprised, then pleased. A philosopher as well as a scientist. I'm Daniel. A graduate student in civil engineering. Clara, I said. A first year. Eventually. We talked for a while right there among the stacks. He was from a city to the south, his father was a teacher and he was fascinated by bridges. The conversation was easy, flowing from his studies to my impressions of the capital. There was no calculation in it, no hidden agenda. It was simply two minds meeting. As we parted ways, he said, I hope to see you around, Clara. The poetry of stone. He smiled again and walked away. I stood there for a long moment, the ghost of a smile on my own lips. For the first time since my rebirth, I was interacting with someone who knew nothing of my past, who saw only Clara, the student. Not a victim, not an avenger, but a person with a future. I walked out of the library into the afternoon sun. The memory of Liam and Alara, of their twisted, miserable end in that small village, felt distant, like a story I had read long ago. I had dragged them to the grave with me once. In this life I had buried them in a different way. They were part of the soil I had left behind. Here, in this city of noise and dreams, I was finally free to build something new, something that belonged only to me. The resentment in my heart, which had burned so brightly for so long, had finally faded to ash. I looked up at the university's grand clock tower, its hands moving steadily forward. My past was a closed book. My future was an unwritten page, and for the first time in 2 lifetimes, I was eager to begin writing it. The autumn air in the capital was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and coal smoke. Stepping onto the campus of Capital University as a registered student felt like crossing a final, decisive threshold. The grand buildings, which had once seemed so imposing, now felt like promises kept. I wore a new, simple blue tunic my mother had made, the fabric rough but clean, and it felt like a suit of armor. My first class was Professor Albright's introductory geology. He beamed when he saw me, giving a small, approving nod from behind his lectern. I found a seat near the front, my notebook open and my pen ready. As he began to speak about tectonic plates and the deep time of the earth, I felt a profound sense of rightness. This was where I was meant to be. The knowledge was a solid thing, unchangeable and honest, unlike the shifting lies of my past. Daniel, the engineering student from the library, was waiting for me after class. "So, how was the poetry of stone?" he asked, falling into step beside me. "More like the violence of stone," I said, a genuine smile touching my lips for what felt like the first time in weeks. "Continents crashing together, mountains thrusting upwards. It's not a gentle story." "I like that," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "A story with force. It suits you." The directness of his compliment, so different from Liam's calculated flattery, caught me off guard. I didn't know how to respond, so I simply nodded, a faint warmth rising to my cheeks. We walked together across the quad and he pointed out various departments sharing bits of university lore. It was easy, normal. A fragment of the youth I had been robbed of in my first life. This budding normalcy was my anchor as I navigated the challenges of my new life. Our family's financial situation was still precarious. My father's job as a groundskeeper provided a small, steady wage and the immense benefit of our university-subsidized room. He came home each evening with dirt under his nails and a quiet pride in his eyes. He was contributing. He was providing. It was enough for him. My mother's sewing business was growing slowly, one satisfied customer at a time. Mrs. Albright had been a powerful advocate, and my mother's meticulous, honest work was its own advertisement. She would sit by our single window, her fingers flying as she turned cuffs and took in seams, her hum a constant comforting sound in our small home. But it wasn't enough for me. I saw the weariness in their eyes, the careful way they counted our money. I had brought them here for a better life, not a life of continued struggle. I needed to contribute. The answer came from an unexpected place. Daniel. We had taken to studying together in the afternoons, our textbooks spread across a worn table in the engineering library. He was brilliant, his mind a logical, structured counterpart to my own, which was more accustomed to literature and history. He helped me untangle the complexities of physics and calculus, and in return I helped him polish his often clunky essay drafts. One afternoon, he noticed me staring blankly at a page, my brow furrowed not in concentration but in worry. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, closing his own book. "It's nothing," I said too quickly. He waited, his silence a gentle pressure. I sighed, giving in. "It's my parents. We're managing. But just barely. I need to find a way to help. A job." The word felt foreign. A job for a student was almost unheard of, a distraction from the sacred task of studying. Daniel leaned back, thoughtful. "A job? That's tricky. The university has some clerical work, but it's fiercely competitive." He was quiet for a moment, then his face lit up. "But you're a top student." "The top student, from what I hear." I looked at him, puzzled. "What does that have to do with anything?" "Tutoring," he said simply. "Wealthy families in the city would pay a small fortune for a tutor from Capital University, especially one with your scores. They're desperate to get their children through the entrance exams. Tutoring. The idea was a spark in the dark. It was something I could do, using the very mind that had been my salvation. "Do you really think so?" I asked, a flicker of hope igniting in my chest. "I know so," Daniel said firmly. "Let me ask around. My department head has connections. I'm sure we can find you something." He was as good as his word. Within a week he had arranged an interview with a family named the Zhangs. They lived in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood a tram ride away from the university. Their apartment was spacious, filled with books and the faint scent of incense. Mr. Zhang was a mid-level party official, his wife a quiet, elegant woman. Their son, Xiaoming, was a gangly, sullen 15-year-old who looked at me as if I were his executioner. I sat in their formal living room, my hands folded in my lap, projecting a calm confidence I didn't entirely feel. This was a different kind of test. "Daniel speaks very highly of you, Miss Clara," Mr. Zhang began. "He says you are the most brilliant student in your cohort." "Daniel is too kind," I demurred. "I simply work hard." "We need someone who can instill that same work ethic in our son," Mrs. Zhang said, her voice soft but firm. "His mathematics and sciences are a concern." I turned my gaze to Xiaoming. What do you find most difficult about mathematics? I asked him directly. He shrugged, looking at the floor. It's stupid. It doesn't mean anything. I leaned forward slightly. It means everything, I said, my voice low and intense. It's the language of the universe. The logic behind bridges and buildings, the calculations that put a satellite in orbit. It's not just numbers on a page. It's the hidden structure of the world. Xiaoming looked up surprised. No one had ever put it to him that way before. I spent the next hour not drilling him with problems but talking to him. I learned he loved watching the construction of a new bridge across the river. I used that, sketching a simple arch on a piece of paper and explaining the forces at play. I saw a flicker of understanding, of interest in his eyes. When the hour was up, Mr. Zhang walked me to the door. You have a gift, Miss Clara, he said. You can see the student, not just the subject. We would be honored if you would tutor Xiaoming 3 times a week. We can offer you 15 yuan per session. 15 yuan. 3 times a week. It was more money than my father made in a week. I kept my composure, my heart hammering against my ribs. That would be acceptable, I said calmly. I look forward to working with Xiaoming. I walked out of their building and onto the street, the cool air feeling like a celebration. When I got home, I placed the first week's earnings, 45 yuan, on the table in front of my parents. Their stunned silence was more rewarding than any academic accolade. Clara, my mother whispered, her hand trembling as she touched the money. How? I'm tutoring, I said, unable to keep the pride from my voice. A boy in the city. They pay well. My father looked from the money to my face, his eyes shining. He didn't say a word. He just reached out and squeezed my hand, his grip firm and full of a love so profound it felt like a physical force. That night, as I lay in my narrow bed, I felt a peace I hadn't known was possible. I was building a life. Brick by brick, yuan by yuan, connection by connection. It was a life built on my own merit, my own intelligence, and my own 2 unbroken hands. The past was a ghost, its power fading with each passing day. Liam and Alara were trapped in their private hell, a world away. Here, in the bustling, indifferent capital, I was just Clara. A student. A daughter. A tutor. It was an identity I was finally, joyfully growing into. Winter descended on the capital, draping the university's gabled roofs in a blanket of white and silencing the city's constant roar to a muffled hush. Inside our small room, however, it was warm. A pot of tea steamed on the stove, and the scent of my mother's stew filled the air. We had bought a thicker quilt, and my father had even managed to find a small second-hand radio. Life was no longer just about survival. It was beginning to be about living. My tutoring with Xiaoming had borne fruit beyond the financial. His grades had improved dramatically, and the sullen boy had been replaced by a curious, if still occasionally lazy, young man. The Zhangs were effusive in their gratitude, paying me a bonus and recommending my services to their friends. I now had 2 other students, and the extra income had transformed our circumstances. We ate better. We worried less. The constant, gnawing anxiety in my parents' eyes had finally receded. One evening, Daniel came to our home for dinner. It was a significant gesture. My mother had spent the day cleaning and cooking, nervous about hosting a university graduate student. But Daniel was effortlessly charming, complimenting her cooking and asking my father thoughtful questions about his work with the campus flora. He fit into our simple world without a hint of condescension. After the meal, while my parents listened to a program on the radio, Daniel and I sat by the window watching the snow fall. You've built a good life for them, Clara, he said quietly, his gaze on my parents' contented faces. We built it, I corrected him. I couldn't have done it without you. The tutoring, it changed everything. He turned to look at me, his expression serious in the dim light. I just opened a door. You were the one who walked through it. He paused. You have a force inside you. A resilience. I've seen it since the day I met you in the library. It's like, you've already lived a lifetime of struggle and came out stronger on the other side. His perception was so acute it stole my breath away. For a wild moment I considered telling him everything. The betrayal, the broken hand, the decades of searching, the final, fiery end in a hotel bathroom. The impossible truth of my rebirth. But the words wouldn't come. That story belonged to the ghost of another Clara. This Clara, the one sitting by the window with a kind, intelligent man, had a future to look forward to, not a past to confess. I've had my challenges, I said finally, my voice soft. But I'm where I'm meant to be now. He nodded, accepting my vague answer. I'm glad you are. Later, after he had left and my parents were asleep, I took out a fresh sheet of paper and a pen. The final exams for my first semester were approaching, but that wasn't what I wanted to write. I had started a new habit, a private one. I was writing a story. It wasn't about me. It was a fictional tale about a girl from the countryside who overcomes great obstacles to find her place in the world. But as my pen moved across the page, I realized I was, in a way, writing my own story. I was giving a new, fictionalized shape to my pain and my triumph, transforming the raw material of my suffering into something with meaning, with a narrative arc. I was no longer just living my life, I was authoring it. The pen felt natural in my hand, my script flowing smoothly and without pain. The tendons were strong, whole. The act of writing was no longer associated with trauma, but with creation. The semester ended. I stood before the notice board once more, but this time there was no crowd, no screaming, no alara. I found my student number on the list for the dean's list. I had achieved the highest marks in my class. The satisfaction was deep and quiet, a private victory. Professor Albright stopped me in the hallway. Top of the class, Clara. I knew you had it in you. Have you given any thought to your major? Geology could use a mind like yours. I'm considering literature, Professor, I said. And perhaps some writing courses. He looked surprised, then chuckled. The poetry of words to go with the poetry of stone. A powerful combination. Follow your passion, my dear. That is what this place is for. As I walked back to my room through the snow-covered quad, I thought about his words. Follow your passion. For so long, my only passion had been vengeance. Now the world was opening up, filled with possibilities I had never allowed myself to consider. I reached our building and paused at the door, looking back at the university's grand facade, its windows glowing warmly against the early winter dusk. Somewhere, in a miserable village I would never see again, Liam and Alara were trapped in a cage of their own making, their lives a small, sad story that had already reached its end. My story, however, was just beginning. I had avenged my past self. I had protected my parents. I had secured my future. The resentment that had fueled my rebirth had burned itself out, leaving behind not ashes but fertile ground. I opened the door and stepped inside, the warmth and the smell of home enveloping me. My mother looked up from her sewing and smiled. My father looked up from the radio and nodded. This was my life. Not a revenge fantasy, not a second chance, but my life. Simple, hard-won, and utterly, completely my own. I sat down at the small table, pulled a fresh sheet of paper towards me and picked up my pen. There were no more ghosts to fight, no more scores to settle. There was only the blank page and the future, waiting to be written in my own unbroken hand. The end.